I want to be the first to welcome everyone to our Inventory Manager webinar today. My name is Elizabeth Morris. I'm the event manager here at Cavallo. Just a couple items before we go ahead and get started. Today you can expect about a 30-minute presentation from our presenter, Brandon, and then we'll leave plenty of time at the end for Q&A. Speaking of Q&A, please use that Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen to ask questions at any point throughout the presentation, and we will get to those at the end. Today's webinar is being recorded, so you'll be able to find it on our YouTube channel, on our events page of our website, so that you'll be able to send a link to colleagues or customers of yours, as I know we have some partners on board with us today. So you'll be able to access that probably within the next 24 hours or so following the webinar. So we're very excited to have Brandon Bolenbach with us today. He's one of our senior implementation consultants at Cavallo. He's going to highlight some of our latest enhancements to Inventory Manager, which are designed to transform warehouse operations. So without further ado, I'm going to kick it over to Brandon to introduce himself and start off.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks, Elizabeth. As she said, I'm Brandon Bolenbach. I'm here to cover some of our newer functionality to help provide you guys with some solutions and options for smarter warehousing. So just to jump in here, little info about me. As Elizabeth said, I'm Brandon Bolenbach. I'm a senior software implementation consultant at Cavallo. I've been here for, it'll be 12 years in October. So I started on our support team, which I know a lot of you guys love. I did that for about 6 or 7 months, and then transitioned to our project team, where I've been ever since. Couple things about me. I enjoy reading, movies, TV, playing video games. I'm an amateur, I guess you'd call it, watch enthusiast. I don't have any of the fancy ones. I do have a watch on right now. And a fun fact about me, just so you can get to know me a little better, I'm an award-winning home brewer. Won a couple of local competitions, or a little bit more statewide ones in Michigan several years ago. Not doing it so much anymore as my time sort of dwindled away as I got older, but it's still something I enjoy kind of looking into, and just the hobby of it as a whole. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and jump into what we're going to cover today. So we have added some newer functionality. It's been there for a few months now, I guess beginning of the year. What we're going to cover is going to be our pick and assignments functionality, our batch picking, and our directed picking. And as far as like pick and assignments go, or actually all of these, you can see they were added in Inventory Manager version 5.14, which we released in February of 2025, so this year. So if you're on a version at least after that, or at that version, you guys will have this. May not be something you have enabled or turned on. I know a lot of times when we add new features, we don't automatically turn those on, but they should be there for you in your security to enable, so you guys can start playing around with it. Just a quick summary of what these are. Picking assignments is, you can just think of that as assigning sales orders to your pickers. Our batch picking is, broad strokes, is grouping sales orders together so that users can pick them all at once. And then our directed picking is more a way of guiding pickers. It's a way to make sure that they're, picking things efficiently through the warehouse. So the first thing we're going to touch on is going to be picking assignments. So there's a lot of things around this. As I kind of touched on, it's a way to designate Inventory Manager users as pickers. And we will walk through this a little bit more detail when we get into the demo. But you have your Inventory Manager users, and you designate, okay, these are my users that are part of my picking fulfillment process. These pickers are assigned sales documents for them to pick. And there's several ways to do this in growing complexity, depending on how complex, users need this to happen. There's a manual process which happens through the console, which is the screenshot you guys are seeing, or the image you're seeing on the right. We can automatically have this happen. So this can happen through the console. You'll see again on a bigger screenshot here, there is some light automation that you can have happen within the console itself. So that's the console being the desktop application. There's some ways to do this through the scanner. So maybe you don't want to go initially assign users to the sales documents for them to pick. What can happen is as a user pulls up an order for them to start picking or fulfilling, they will get assigned to that. So the scanner will or can automatically assign those pickers to that order. Oops. The other ways are the automation agent and workflow. So if you want more of a hands-off approach and you really have some of your pick and assignment conditions dialed in, you can have these pickers be assigned orders based on the rules automatically through an automation agent job and through workflow. So obviously, the last two require a little bit more functionality. You have to have a license of SalesPad. You also have to have a license of automation agent. If you just want to use the workflow plugin, that's just forwarding through workflow, so no automation needed there. But if you want that truly automated aspect, you would just need a license of the automation agent connector that we have. And the reason why you'd want to assign pickers, it's going to do a couple of things. It's going to ensure that they know what they want to pick. So I know we hear a lot of customers want to kind of get rid of the paper picking tickets. They want to go paperless, be a little bit more green. But there's information that they need on the picking ticket that we need to make sure that we're able to provide them on the scanner, as well as just a way for them to know, again, the user what they need to pick. So assigning pickers will ensure that they know what to pick. It's also going to help prevent pickers from stepping on each other's toes. A question that gets brought up, I'd say fairly regularly through an implementation or just questions about Inventory Manager is, hey, what happens if two people try to pick the same document? So now we have a way to prevent that from happening. Through some setup and configuration in our security, you can say if I want to, have pickers look up documents through the document lookup, I only want them to be able to see the documents that they're already assigned to, as well as ones that are unassigned. So if a document does get assigned, then other pickers are not going to be able to see that when they look it up. So it's a nice way to, again, make sure that multiple picks aren't happening for the same order. You're getting duplicate picks and things like that. It's just a way to help organize that process. These pickers will become unassigned once the documents are fully picked. So once they're fully picked, their little quantity, your current quantity, as you can see on the far right, there are some metrics on who has what to pick and their quantities. Those will be removed from them, so it'll get reset. So if they've picked all of the things that are assigned to them, their quantities will be 0. And it's just also an easy way to distribute workload, or see and distribute workload rather. So make sure everybody's getting even work. One person isn't pulling all the weight while everyone else is wandering around the warehouse. So there's a couple of definitely good perks there. The next one here is going to be this is just a bigger image of our picking assignments. Again, I'll get into more detail here. This is just a quick overview of what the pick and assignment screen looks like. This is where the manual process would be if I was maybe a warehouse manager and I wanted, more finite control over who's going to be doing what, who's picking what orders. This will allow me to do that. And as I mentioned in the bottom left corner here, we do keep track of some metrics related to the orders that a picker has assigned to them. So you can see what their current quantity is. And then they do have the ability to do like min-max quantities to make sure, or that's there to ensure, again, that work is getting distributed evenly, or as a metric to determine, hey, who should be the next picker that gets a document assigned to them. And we'll drill into this a little bit more detail as we get to the demo. I just want to cover the next topic here that we'll cover on the demo as well, which is our batch picking. And as I touched on in the agenda, again, the overview is it's a way of grouping sales documents together so that they can be picked all at once. On the right side here, this is a screenshot of what that batch picking screen looks like. You can see, we've got a list of the documents at the bottom. Here are our documents that have maybe the specific item on it that's selected, the total of 5 sales documents to pick. So there's a lot of information there. And similar to the picking assignments, these can be grouped ahead of time. So similar to the picking assignments, there is a batch picking assignment screen in the console. So it can be picked, or they grouped ahead of time, or they can be happening on the fly. Again, similar to how users are assigned automatically when they pull up an order in the picking or the batch picking. This will also happen when they do their first submission. So I'm a user, I pull up a batch pick and I do my first submission. I'm going to get assigned, or I'm going to be assigning those batch picks as we go through. With the batch picking, it adds a couple of layers of complexity again, because you're able to we're now able to fulfill multiple orders at the same time. So we need to make sure we're accounting for different ways that a customer may want to do that. So we have three main ways that this is going to be possible, or three ways that this works. The no fulfillment option is basically like a staging. So what'll happen is no fulfillments will actually occur. This is some configuration happening in the settings and the security. You would still pull up your batch pick ID, so you can see that in the upper right. As documents are grouped together, they're assigned an ID. You pull up that ID in our batch picking screen, and then those documents would show up for you that are part of that ID or that group. A user for staging would go through the normal process. The picking process is really not that much different than our standard picking that's already been around for a long time. But instead of actually fulfilling the order, it's going through a staging process. You specify a staging, essentially like a staging batch. And if you're doing multi-bin, you can assign a staging bin. And as a user is going through, those documents are getting updated. The items are getting updated to either move into that, moving into the batch and moving into that staging bin. When everything is done, the documents will move to sort of a finalized bin. Hey, or a batch rather, we've finished staging. And then the regular picking process, the picking module that again we've had for a long time, users would be able to pull up these orders that are in that staging area and fulfill from that staging batch. So again, it's going to be dependent on process, on warehouse, how users are being utilized. And maybe it makes sense to have certain users walk through the warehouse to stage all these orders or all these items, all these orders in one spot, and then have a different set of pickers go through and pick just from that local close, staging area. The other option is going to be our manual fulfillment, which is basically you're selecting an order to fulfill. So again, users will pull up a batch ID that will list the orders that they have to pick that are part of that group or that batch pick. Along with that, they will still also then have to manually select the order that they're wanting to fulfill against. So this, along with assigning pickers, is almost like a double duty. You can make sure that, hey, I know this is getting assigned to them. This is how we can track their workload to make sure they're not getting overburdened. But it's also a nice way for them to group things together so that they can see all at once, this is what I need to go through and pick, even though they're still going to fulfill one order at a time. And then lastly is the automatic fulfillment, which is going to be fulfilling all orders at once. So think of our existing picking process. You're picking an order, or our picking module, I should say. You're picking an order, and as you're hitting submit for each line item, it is updating the quantity fulfilled. That is what is going to happen when you're doing the automatic fulfillment, except it's going to happen for all orders at once. This is how I have my demo configured, so this is what we're going to see. But in this screenshot that you're seeing, for example, my batch pick ID number 6, I'm going to pick the item HD20. At the bottom, I can see I have a total quantity to pick of 6, and that 6 HD20s is spread across these 3 orders that are showing up in that total quantity to pick area. So we can see order 2447 has 2, 2448 has 1, and then 2455.1 has 3, which is a total of that 6. So that's where that's coming from. What's going to happen here is after I go through and scan or put in my quantity that I'm picking for that HD20 and hit submit, the system will go through each of those orders and fulfill that correct quantity based on the amount that they need. So this is truly, the batch picking side of it. I would say you are fulfilling all 3 of these orders at once for that line item. And then the process repeats itself each time for all of the items that are part of that batch pick. Another nice feature, I kind of touched on it in the staging side of it, is the in progress queue and fully picked queue. I know this is something that's come up a lot as well, as customers are asking us, about, hey, how does this work? Can I do this? Can I do that? They wanted to see, I need to know, we know that we have something in the ready to pick batch, for example. Anything that's in ready to pick is where the scanners will pick them up and start picking. But at that stage, you really lose visibility on how do I know that someone's actually in the process of picking it? It still sits in ready to pick until they're done. So what we've added with batch picking is an in progress queue. This is similar to the queues setup that we have for our regular picking module, where once something is completed, it can move that batch to the next queue. Instead of waiting until everything is picked, what this will do is the first time a submission occurs for a batch pick, so the first item you're picking and submitting, it will take all of the orders that are part of that batch pick and update the batch to whatever queue you have for, or whatever batch you have for that in progress queue. So in my example, mine are going to be in a ready to stage or a staging queue. And then as this is where I'd go in to do my batch picking assignments. And then as a user pulls up a batch pick and does that first submission, it will update the batch to my in progress batch or in progress queue. And then finally, the fully picked queue. This is the closest thing that we have that resembles our existing picking process. Once everything is fully picked, so that you submit that last fulfillment for the last item on that batch pick, it will then take all of those orders that are part of that batch pick ID and move them into the next queue. So I was actually really excited about this because, again, I know a lot of customers have asked this for a while. So I'm glad that we got that added. Between batch picking and the picking assignments, it adds a lot of flexibility. I was actually recently on site with a customer in Atlanta who had maybe not necessarily what they would consider batch picking. It's not something that they're doing now, but it would be something that made sense to them going forward. And their current process of printing pick tickets and organizing them so that they know here's what each user is going to pick is something that we could accommodate within either the batch picking and or the picking assignments. So, if they decide to utilize those functions, it's something that they can, help to achieve their goal of going paperless. They're one of the many that want to get rid of the paper pick tickets. So, that's something that we can kind of do for any number of scenarios. As we get into the picking assignments, there's a lot of flexibility in how those are going to be assigned. So. And this is this is the batch picking screen itself. So this is within the inventory manager console. This is how a user, maybe like a warehouse manager, would go through and manually assign or create these batch picks ahead of time. We do have some rules in the upper right corner, as you can see, to sort of do some mass assignments with special rules, making sure that there's only, a minimum number of documents, a maximum number of documents, so that if one user is doing this batch pick, they're not going to get, again, overburdened with having more work than maybe they can achieve in the set amount of time. So if you don't want to use the bulk pick assignments, users can come in and just manually choose the orders listed here. You do specify it by warehouse and by batch, or you can, to help figure out which orders need to be grouped together. You group them together and then hit the assign batch pick, and you will get a batch pick ID that you can see in that far right column on the yellow right column. And then finally, the last thing we're going to cover in a little bit more detail as we get to the demo is going to be our directed picking. So directed picking, as I mentioned, is a way to guide users on the most efficient route as they're picking orders. It's used with our batch picking and the standard picking module. So as we see in the configuration on the next slide here, by default, these will apply to our standard picking module that we've had forever. You can choose to apply it to batch picking, and there's a bunch of other options as well on how it should apply. Should this apply for your document lookup screens? Should it apply if someone is looking at the item lookup or bin or serial? So there's a lot of options that users can play with to figure out what is going to make the most sense for their process, for their users. As well as there is also flexible options for handling different warehouse setups, which we'll see again on the next slide here. So for our customers that have multiple locations, multiple warehouses that they're shipping from, maybe warehouse A is configured in one way while warehouse B is configured in another way. We need to make sure that we can accommodate that. So we actually allow, for example, for our bin priorities, which we'll see on the next slide here. If you want to make sure people are taking an efficient route, picking bins that make sense sequentially. That may be different in warehouse A versus warehouse B. So by having it break down by warehouse, we can achieve that in those different warehouse configurations. And again, this is the directed picking configuration screen on the inventory manager console. I'm only showing the bin priorities, but our kind of goal with each of these, so for bin priorities, I'll start with that since that one's showing. We want to alleviate the unnecessary back and forth movements by pickers by making sure that they have an efficient route to go through the warehouse. In my example, I'm sorting this by my bin in ascending order. So if I have bin A, if I have items that are in bin A through Z, I'm going to make sure that I'm suggesting them items that are going to be in bin A first. As they pick those, it'll go through bin B and C and so on. Another kind of neat thing we have with the bin specifically is we can alternate those bin priorities for each document. So you can imagine, I start here with bin A, and I'm a picker, and I'm going to go all the way to the end with bin Z. Well, so that I don't have to then grab my next document and start all the way at the front and go back again, we can alternate. If you're thinking you're going from A to Z, you're at the end, we can then go Z to A. So they're able to go one document, pick another document, without wasting steps going back and forth or going back to that starting point of bin A. So really cool feature that the development team put in there. I think it was a pretty thoughtful thing to add. I'll show the other ones as we go through it, but just what we can do on the sales document properties, or the thought of, hey, why do I need sales document priorities? Easy kind of thought is, hey, I have a customer that needs this rushed out, and I want to make sure that this is going through my process as fast as possible. So if you maybe have a toggle on your sales document that is a rush order, you can toggle that, and then we can specifically look at rush orders and make sure that those are getting bumped up in the list. Same idea as maybe you have customer tiering, and you've got your A tier customers that provide a lot of business for you. You want to make sure that they're getting their inventory speedily. So based on maybe the customer tiering you have, you can make sure an A tier customer is going to get their inventory picked first before a C or D tier customer. Our serial priorities, this is something to ensure users are picking based on whatever makes sense for your process. So you can print or pick based on your FIFO or LIFO, first in, first out, or last in, first out, whatever makes sense for the business. You can make sure that the serial numbers that they're going to get suggested to pick are following that suit. You will see that on the demo. We do have a little kind of helper section to achieve that, specifically FIFO or LIFO picking. And then very similar, the last on the lot priorities, making sure that your users are picking lots based on whatever makes sense for your business. They're picking based on the FIFO, picking based on LIFO, or specifically with lots, if there's something that has an expiration date, we can pick first expiring, first out, to make sure that anything that's going to expire first is getting pushed out to the customers, so you don't have inventory sitting on your shelf that's expired and you can't sell anymore. And then a few final notes here before I jump into the demo is that all these new features can be used individually or together to help maximize your warehouse efficiency while maintaining picking accuracy. If you don't want to use or don't have the need for batch picking, but you can really utilize picking assignments and the directed picking, you can do just those two. You don't have to use any one or all three combined. And then configuring of the picking assignments, batch picking, and directed picking is handled within the inventory manager console. Besides the picking assignments and directed picking, those are, if you want to, available to sort of do on the fly, but with a little less customization on that part. And then that's the end of the slide deck here. So I'm going to flip over to the demo. I do have to start my sign in here because it's been asleep for a minute. But as I mentioned, I wanted to jump into the inventory manager side, or the console side first. So we'll first cover directed picking configuration, I think, because that makes the most sense. We're going to get into the actual picking process, but first we need to configure how that's going to work. So under your setup, you've got directed picking configuration, and under sales document properties, this is what I was talking about with the rush order, for example. That's how I have mine set up. If I have something that's set to rush order, I want to make sure that those are going to bubble up to the top before non-rush orders. And you can see our configuration options here. For me, I have this just applied to the lookup sort order. As you hover over these two, we do have tooltips to help you understand what these functions are. But mine is just applying to the lookup sort order. So what that means is when I go into my picking screen and I click on the doc number lookup to bring my list of orders that I have to pick, based on my priorities here, the ones that meet these priorities are going to be at the very top. So users will know that I need to pick these first, and so on. Some of the other options are applying it to our suggested item cells. So that's going to be the box with some information we can provide the pickers. You can have it suggest, hey, you need to pick this document first. And we can also just auto-populate it. So to make it a little easier for the picking team, again, this may be a preference per customer, per setup, but you can auto-populate that sales document number as well. Again, that's going to be based on the priorities that we have set here. The next one is the screenshot you saw before, but I did mention you can have these set up across different warehouses. If you don't need that, we do have a default option, which is what I'm going to be using. Otherwise, you can come in and set these up across all of your different locations. For example, if I had a warehouse option, or for my warehouse specifically, I wanted to have something different, I could do that here. In my case, I'm just going to use the default. If there is a specific warehouse priority set up, it will trump the default option and be used instead. So you can see for me, I'm doing a lot of the same things that you can do on the document properties. I've got my lookup sort order. So I'm going to sort it in my lookup. I'm suggesting the bin that they need. I'm going to suggest the item that they need. And I'm applying that to my batch pick. And I'm also going to auto-populate the bin to make it a little easier for them to see. They'll see it in two spots as we get into the demo here. I need to pick it from this bin if I can. Serial priorities, lot priorities are both pretty similar. You do have, again, the same options on how this should apply or appear. I want to have it in the lookup. So when I look up my list of serial numbers, it's going to suggest the serial numbers or bring the serials with the highest priority up to the top based on my priority fields. So in this case for serials, I've got my serial related fields here. Lot tracked, I'll have my lot related fields. Sales document are going to be your sales documents, which do include user fields, which is what my example has. But then we also have this little configuration tip, as I touched on. How do I set this up to prioritize first in, first out? Well, you can use the date received and order those by ascending. If you want the reverse for last in, first out, you would just choose the date received again, but you would order that by a descending option. And then same for lot priorities, very similar. You're going to have your options for your lot related fields. And then we have our tip here, configuration tip on how to configure those different options. The next thing to jump into are going to be our pick and assignments. So if I am looking at ready to stage, because ready to stage is my batch that I need to start picking from, I'll go ahead and hit my search. And I can see some of these already have a batch pick ID. I can come in here and assign these. I'm going to allow my scanner to assign these. So as my user that I log into, I'll start my pick and pull that up, and then I'll assign that here. Here are some of those auto pick or auto assign options I mentioned earlier. So you can choose specific users that are pickers, and I want to maybe assign all of these, and I want to have it be balanced. So This will take into account, again, if you have any min maxes configured for that picker to make sure that they're not getting more work than somebody else. It'll help balance that load out. And then bottom left here, the stats for the current status of my pickers. So none of my pickers currently have anything going, so I need to start assigning them some stuff. A couple of the tabs here, this is where you'd actually start out when you're going to do the picking assignments. This is where you would designate which pickers or which users in Inventory Manager rather are going to be pickers. So here are all of my users in SalesPad or Inventory Manager and which ones are designated as pickers. You can also create picking groups and assign users to those picking groups if you want to do it that way. So if you're not assigning one individual user, you want to assign those users based on a group, you can do it that way as well. And then the automatic assignments. This is where the automation agent, the SalesPad workflow plugin will come into play, where you can get into really granular ways of assigning. How do I know, or how do I assign a pick for maybe a specific user, or how do I need to divvy these out? Maybe I want all of these customers for this picker to, they're picking just that customer. So I'd assign that. Or this user, this picker is going to pick things that are rush orders. So they're the only ones that do or handle rushes. Based on how you configure or set these up, the system can automatically look at the documents that fit those criteria and make sure that it's getting assigned to the users that match the criteria or the setup here. With that in mind, there are some kind of catches or caveats depending on how you have stuff set up. Maybe the picker that does rush orders is completely at capacity. There are instances where if the automation job runs and it finds a list of rush orders, but it's already at that picker's already at capacity, which we can see how do we want to handle that here. Capacity handling. There are instances where no picks will get assigned because that user is just too busy at the moment. So until they're able to work through some of their current workload, the assignment for them will not automatically assign them any. So just a heads up there that it can be restrictive to make sure that, again, you're not overburdening those users. And then finally, the last screen here, our batch pick assignment. Similar to before, I'm going to look at my ready to stage. This is where I'm going to come in and I'm going to manually assign these to a batch pick ID. So you do get some information here on the far right, so you can kind of figure out, similar to assigning them to a user. I want to make sure I'm not going to overburden the person that's going to get this batch pick ID, so I can see the total lines to pick, the total quantity, and then the total unique line items that are part of each sales order. My bulk assignments here, again, I can say they must share the same customer, must share items, must share shipping method. I can have min-max documents set here. And based on this information here, I would be able to come in and select all of my orders and do the assign all. And that's going to divvy out or generate batch picks based on these criteria here. You will get a little summary of kind of how it happened or how it decided. So in this case, just for the demo purposes, I'm going to go ahead and pick just a couple of orders here. So these are all ones that are going to be from today. I have a filter here, doc date is today. So you can filter these grids out to help, clean up and maybe make it a little bit more sense on how you're going to plan on grouping these together. So I just want these two to be assigned a batch pick. So I'll go ahead and do that here. I'll get my confirmation. Do I want to assign a batch pick ID, which I do. And then it generates the number here. The number is customizable, the format and how it's working. And then if I wanted to, I can also come in and assign these last two. If you are assigning to an existing batch pick, you should be able to do that. So if you wanted to, have one large batch pick, you can, assign those as the orders are coming in and assign them to that same batch pick, as long as one of the orders that is selected is already assigned to that one. So I've got these assigned. I don't have any, or I got the batch picks assigned. I don't have any picking assignments. I'm going to jump into my SalesPad desktop here just to show you my sales monitor. I'll pop back and forth to this as well. I just wanted to show, how we can bring some of that data into SalesPad. So I have a batch pick ID. If I refresh this, we'll see that these two orders are assigned to 51, and then the other two are assigned to my batch pick 52. And they're both in my all 4 documents, both batch picks are in my ready to stage. So you get back to here. So I'm logged in. I'm gonna log out and log back in again just to make sure we're still good. So here is, if you've used Inventory Manager before, a screen you should be familiar with. This is our just main menu. I'm going to jump into my batch picking. I have my screen laid out in this way. You do have the ability to customize how this screen is set up in our layout maintenance. For batch pick ID, I can see all the open ones that are available. Again, based on my settings, I'm only going to see batch picks that either are unassigned or are assigned to myself. And I'm going to pick this one here where it's just 2 sales documents, 3 items, and a total quantity to pick of 9. So when I select this, it's going to load my screen here, and it's going to give me some details on that batch pick ID. And once that loads, I'm going to come back over to Inventory Manager briefly and do a search. And without me doing anything, again, this is just happening from the user pulling that order up. We can now see I logged in as Jacob, and Jacob now has a current quantity of 9 to pick. That user will also show up in the grid. So if I want to sort by my picking ID, I can see Jacob has to pick this batch ID 51, which consists of these 2 orders. So if I come back to SalesPad and my scanner, what we're seeing here is going to be this suggested item section. This is based on what I have set up in my directed picking. So we're going to, again, this one part here is going to give you a little visual of all of the things that we've just covered. We just looked at the picking assignment that assigned it based on my user pulling up this batch pick. The batch pick consisting of documents, these 2 documents, which I can click on and take a look at, as well as the suggested item section, which is going to be using my directed picking. So I'm sorting by my bin, so it should be sorting my items to pick by the bin that they're in, sorting A to Z. Other than that, the process itself isn't too different from what users are going to expect or can expect from their existing picking module. I'm obviously on an emulator, so I can't scan, but if I wanted to, I could scan my item number. In my case, I'm just going to pull it up here and manually choose this. The 2 bin, this is sort of part of the staging process. So if you are wanting to do that staging and move these bins out of the initial bin you're picking from, you can specify a 2 bin. So there's an option to default this bin into something like staging or whatever you want to call it. Or you can manually put it in. I'm not going to use it, or I'm not using it, so I'm just going to I'm just going to leave it blank. Manually set my quantity, and I can see my 2 orders and how the quantity for this HD20 is going to break out across both of those. And I'll go ahead and hit my submit. This will submit the pick for those 2, suggest my next item based on my bin priority. And if I come back into SalesPad and I refresh, this is that in progress bin I was talking about during the slideshow. Because I submitted this pick, me as maybe the warehouse manager or whoever wants to see this data, I can see that, I did have 2 orders and ready to stage. Oh, now since they've started the pick, I can see that they're in progress. So this is where the batch picking, that next, or that staging batch that it's called, will provide more visibility into what's actually happening in the warehouse, what's currently happening, what's currently getting picked. So I will run through the rest of these here. Again, the process isn't any different than what I just showed. I'll go ahead and pick my next item. You'll notice that it's not going in order here. My next item, according to this, should be my XLG, but it's telling me to pick this because, again, my directed picking that I have set up to go based on my bin. So I'll select the one here. Nothing should happen in this case for this one because they're not. It's not fully picked. They're going to just still stay remaining in progress. And my last one, 100 XLG. So I'll go ahead and select that item. This is a serial tracked item. I don't unfortunately have anything configured for this for the priorities, so I'm just gonna go ahead and pick my serial numbers that I have. Normally I could come in and again scan these if I wanted to. So since I've got my serial number selected, my quantity to pick is 3. I've picked 3 already, so now I can hit my submit. This should be my final pick, so we should see this become fully picked. Batch is fully picked. If we come back to my sales monitor and refresh, it moved it into my next stage here, which is my ready to pack. So if I take a look at these orders, and while those are loading, I pull up my inventory manager. Again, Jacob, my warehouse user, has fully picked his assigned documents. So if I hit search again, you'll notice that Jacob's current quantity is now back to 0 because he has nothing assigned to him. So he can get assigned more work, more things for him to pick. And then we jump back in, didn't load my other one here. So we take a look at these orders. Both are fulfilled, so fulfilled and fulfilled. If we take a look at our audit, we're getting a lot of the same audit messages that you would have seen before. This is again before with the regular picking process. So it fulfilled 3 of the HD20. It filled serial 25, 26, and 27. So those 3 serial numbers for my 100 XLG. And again, the 2 and 1 for those 2 items here, which we'll see in the audit log here. So I would say that is a brief high level of some of the things that batch picking, the pick and assignments, and the directed picking can achieve. Sort of using those all in the same process or all together, but using some of the basic functionality of it. Again, this can get a lot more specific to how you guys need it to work. It can auto assign those pickers based on again min max thresholds and things like that. But if we come back into our batch pick ID as well, similar to how other things work inside of inventory manager, since that is now gone, or since now that is fully picked, we no longer see that here. And again, as I mentioned, if I wanted to as a user, I could come in and pick my next one, and Jacob now has another set of documents for him to go ahead and pick here. And if we get back to our presentation here, that's what I wanted to kind of cover for our demo. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Definitely let me know if there's any questions. Hopefully some have come in as we've gone through. Elizabeth, any questions coming in?
Yeah, thanks so much, Brandon. Appreciate that run through. And when you mentioned you were with a customer recently down in the Atlanta area, I know that was just yesterday, in fact. So
yeah, it was yesterday. Yeah,
we appreciate you being here with us for today's live webinar, even though I know you got home pretty late last night. So good stuff here. So yeah, we do have a couple questions. So first, do I need to be working in a GP multi-bin environment to take full advantage of inventory manager?
No, so not inventory manager. There's definitely things that you can still utilize within inventory manager without being in a multi-bin environment. With picking, picking is just the fulfillments. Batch picking is still just doing fulfillments which aren't tied directly to multi-bin. If you want to utilize some of our directed picking aspects, then you do need a multi-bin. For example, for bin priorities. If you're not in multi-bin, there aren't really bins for us to prioritize. So in that case, you would need that. With that said, we do have an older way that we've done in the past to sort of prioritize or route users through picking without having multi-bin turned on. So you could still utilize the GP default bin for an item in a warehouse, but you miss out on some of the visibility, and you wouldn't be able to utilize the directed picking bin priorities in the system. We have a separate process which uses a stored procedure to kind of suggest the next item to pick, which we could then use that bin.
Okay, good to know. Looks like next one we have is inventory manager, something you have to implement like all together. Can you like stagger aspects of it to implement?
Yeah, same. you can kind of do it piecemeal if you wanted to. In some cases, it makes sense to help, alleviate a large change. If you wanted to just start out with doing even some of the more basic things that we didn't cover on the webinar, if you wanted to just do site transfers, inventory adjustments. If you are in multi-bin, you want to just use it for bin transfers to start out with, you can do that. There's really little configuration needed for that. And then if you wanted to, you can add picking. Okay, we're comfortable with the picking side. Now we want to maybe do the packing process to pack our items. So definitely not required to do it all at one time. And in some cases, depending on the processes, we probably recommend maybe doing some of it piecemeal.
Okay. Awesome. And then I think out of curiosity, just for me and maybe others on today's webinar, what does the implementation process look like? Can you just walk us through, like, maybe at a high level of like the timing and how that might work?
Yeah, so I actually just did an implementation for this a couple weeks ago. We closed it. It really depends on what things you're wanting to use. So that customer really wanted to use the batch picking. So we just made a couple of updates to their workflow to adjust how, we're going to start here instead of, in a staging batch where we'll assign, this is where we'll go in and assign the documents to a batch pick, where they're going to go next in that in progress section, and then where do they land after that. So depending on how your current workflow is set up, there may be some minor tweaks that we have to make. And then after that, really, you can kind of just start using it. It's maybe logging in and making adjustments to the screen to see how you want the fields laid out. So I'd say depending on the end user's, I don't want to say commitment, but availability, that helps a lot. So if users are available to meet with us to configure and test and get that set up, then it can be we can probably get it up and running as quick as a couple calls. If they're maybe 1 hour calls, couple of 1 hour calls, maybe 1 2 hour call, at least to get things up and running to test. I think overall, outside of just testing and waiting for that to happen, we had things running for them and really in a couple of weeks. Again, that's just them dealing with their calendar and things like that. So it's going to come down to timeline, the availability for testing and getting those things configured. But the configuration for batch picking is fairly simple. I'd say the picking assignments, if you wanted to use the automatic one, would get into a little bit longer because we need to make sure we're figuring out the conditions, the criteria to assign, and do rigorous testing to make sure things are getting assigned the way that you want. But either way, generally within maybe a couple of weeks, we can have things running in test for sure, if not moved over to the production side.
Awesome. That's actually quicker than I would have thought. Yeah, I guess it depends on the motivation and
yeah.
Awesome. Good stuff. Well, it looks like that's gonna conclude all of our questions, Brandon. So thank you for the demo and for your presentation and for making it back to Grand Rapids last night for this webinar. But also thank you to all of you for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. We hope you join us at some other webinars. We have almost 2 a week, at least through mid-October. So definitely check out our event calendar on our website. You can find that at cavallo.com/events-schedule. And you can register for upcoming webinars, but you can also view recordings of past webinars you may not have been able to attend. If you have any questions or have specific needs for your organization that you want to discuss, let your account manager know, or just shoot us an email at marketing@cavallo.com, and I personally will make sure your email gets to the right hands. Lastly, there will be a super short survey, just 3 questions at the end of this webinar when you exit out. So we greatly appreciate your feedback. And once again, thank you so much for joining, and we hope everyone has a great rest of your week.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye.